is another episode by Roanne. I'm recording this from Paraguay, where I'm currently fieldworking. But this story is about the time I was conducting fieldwork in a country that could not be more different than this one, Greenland. It's a story I carried with me for a long time, but apparently I needed all of this space to gather all the loose memories and fragments into one coherent narrative. And I'm not just talking about the physical, but also about the temporal space. There exist 15 years between my life now and the experiences I had as a young anthropologist in Greenland. I needed to become a little bit older and wiser to appreciate the lesson about parenting that the Inuit tried to pass on me back then. Or perhaps I really just needed to become a mother of a now nearly 4-year-old before their lesson could really land with me. Isn't that always the case in life? Something can only stick when there's something to stick it to. Things can only resonate with us if we recognize something there that's already alive within us. I conducted fieldwork on a tiny island with only 79 other inhabitants. So yep, I was number 80. My research was about the future of climate changes, and I lived among Inuit hunters and fishers to understand how they coped with the melting ice sheets and rising temperatures. But as anthropologists, we study one particular thing by getting a sense of all the other things that make up the life worlds of our interlocutors. We try to experience what others experience on a daily basis so that we get to know them as intimately as possible to us, which helps us to grasp how they think and feel. Indeed, how others perceive the topic of our investigation. We want to understand from their eyes, minds, and perhaps most of all, hearts. In this case, experiencing what your interlocutors experience meant very concretely that I spent a lot of time drinking black coffee and eating dried meats in tiny, cozy houses. There, men, women, and many children would sleep, eat, and chat for hours, on days when it was stormy outside or on days when, for other reasons, hunting was impossible. And there were many such days. Due to climate change, the temperatures of air and sea are rising, causing animals to take different routes. Additionally, pieces of the Greenlandic ice cap are constantly melting, and because of all the small chunks of ice floating in the sea, the small motorboats of the hunters cannot navigate. Therefore, people became, simply put, idle on most days. This had all sorts of problematic consequences, ranging from hunger to increased domestic violence, and I've written about that in my work. But despite of all those negative impacts, the situation gave me the opportunity to witness parents interacting with their children. Entire families were often in close quarters for days, sometimes weeks. And now, I'll be very honest. I never said so out loud, but inside, I was quite critical of what I observed regarding their parenting. Call this naive, since I didn't have children myself, or call it the arrogance of the outsider, but I noticed that Inuit parents rarely scolded their children, not even when I found the children to be quite noisy or stubborn. To give you an example, I once saw this group of little boys hitting the wooden houses of this village really hard with sticks. It made a loud banging noise that startled people. It startled me as well, in fact, because they were hitting against my house one evening, just when I wanted to go to sleep. Everyone seemed as annoyed as I was, but no one reprimanded the children. In fact, people just laughed about it and made jokes to the kids, which, in my opinion, only encouraged their behavior. Another example then. One morning when hunting was actually possible, it was dry that day and the sky looked beautiful and blue even though it was almost minus 30 degrees Celsius outside, I went out with a hunter and his daughter, who was 8 years old. The girl ran off so far that we could barely see her, and I knew this could be really dangerous. It's very easy to get lost on the ice. But her father did not behave angry. I did see him look very worried. He kept an eye on her while he was pulling in the fishing lines, and his jaws, I could see, were firmly clenched. At one point, he stopped his work and quickly went to fetch her by boat. He ignored her protests and didn't look pleased, remained silent for a bit, but once again, he didn't scold her. In fact, a little later, he made her laugh, and it seemed as if nothing had happened. When I later asked an elder in the village about such examples, he shared with me that one wise lesson, which I couldn't yet understand at the time, but which I've recently come to realize is the best parenting advice I've ever received. As a parent, he said, your main task is to make your child laugh, and nothing else matters. Now, at the time, this advice went right over my head, and although I thought back to it frequently after I had left Greenland, I still did not understand it then. It seemed to me that parents had more important responsibilities, like teaching their child what appropriate and social behavior is, for example. But much later, a few months after I had given birth to my own daughter and I couldn't fall asleep between feedings in the night, I heard a podcast that featured a child psychologist who echoed the elder's wisdom, albeit in different words, and I finally understood the insight in that lesson. Unfortunately, I've forgotten the name of this academic, but I recall he was from a prestigious university, and much more importantly, what he said made total sense. He explained that parents can actually do very little to prevent their child from going off the rails. Whether your child ends up on drugs or gets involved in crime, he said, is largely a matter of luck or misfortune. Plus, it depends on which peers your child becomes influenced by. It doesn't matter so much if you guided your child well with homework, taught them to say thank you or eat with their mouths closed. What does matter, as this study revealed, is how strong your emotional bond with your child is. And this is a bond that must grow over years. Because if you and your child have a very good connection, by the time they become vulnerable to getting in trouble, they are most likely to come to you for help. If, in contrast, your relationship is strained, that trust is lacking, and they will try to solve problems on their own or turn to friends, neither of which is always helpful in getting them back on the right track. So, the psychologist said, if you want to do one major thing in your parenting, make sure to have fun with your kid. That's right. We have to make fun with them. We have to make them laugh. Since we arrived in Paraguay, for weeks now, my toddler is somewhat jack-legged and mainly overly excited about this foreign adventure of ours. She insists she's not hungry when it is dinner time and suddenly demands yogurt or chocolate when it's near bedtime. She will not go to sleep before 10 p.m. and does no longer want to sleep in her own bed. Instead, she wants to play until midnight and then fall asleep in between me and her dad, taking up so much space that he and I nearly fall out of bed. Of course, I understand that her behavior is related to our trip, but I still worry a bit sometimes, especially about that extremely late bedtime. What helps me ease into it is to think back of those Inuit parents and their sometimes quite stubborn children. I often remind myself now that it will work out with her. It's okay if she crosses the line once in a while. What time she goes to bed and where, it's really not as important as we parents often make it. What matters is that I cherish that strong bond with her, that she trusts me. So, sure, sometimes I set a boundary when I truly believe it's better for her safety or well-being, but I also let her just do what toddlers do. Follow their own whims, be energetic, adventure, say no when parents say yes, discover autonomy. And then I make her, and often myself and her dad, laugh whenever I can, so that we regularly find ourselves giggling together in bed around midnight. It can be a bit exhausting, but it's also funny, and as I finally realize, this might just be the most important task I have as a parent.